Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/The Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got 3 weeks of comments to go over, and I went through and picked out the best ones. Now, these comments are ones where I would love the person to reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com to discuss what they left more, maybe even chat about it. So keep that in mind with what you hear. First one is an interesting comment that was left on Bigfoot Ranch Part 2 by TSAIA. He writes, or they write, is this a lady who was raised in a family that interacted with Bigfoot like extended family? There was a lady interviewed on In Search Of during the 1970s who had family members who were part Bigfoot. They talked about them coming to the back door of the house to ask for garlic because garlic keeps the fleas off. All right, so if anyone wants to take this quest and figure this out, see if you can find the episode, see if it's an individual named Connie, and put that in the comments of this episode to let us know what you found. That's your quest. Let's continue with the Denny episode. There's a interesting comment on here from Obelus. I'd like to know if the real estate agent tells people that the properties have Sasquatch. The people that sold our place to us didn't tell us, but the lady said she always carried a weapon on her when she was outside and looked at me in a way that made me think she wanted to tell me something but couldn't quite bring herself to do it. When I asked why she carried a weapon, she said she was scary, meaning she's usually scared. Please reach out to me about that. Also, Obelus writes, Montgomery County, Texas is a hotspot for these creatures. Conroe and the town of Montgomery are located there. We live near there and have had experiences for about 4 years with a tribe. Would love to talk to you. Bill writes on the Dwayne episode that was released recently. When I was 16 years old, I was a volunteer firefighter in Oak Ridge, Oregon. We got a call from a man in a camp trailer at Blair Lake. He said Bigfoot was looking in his windows and harassing him. Several men went up and chased Bigfoot away. It was snow covered there. Bill, I'd love to hear from you. We have Crizzy on the Rainier, Oregon episode saying near City Road. I know it. If you know about Bigfoot activity near City Road, please reach out. On a live show, Oregon Wildman writes, I'll be at the festival. Above the reservoir, I had 2 5-minute stare downs with one at 30 feet and again at 80 feet. Oregon Wildman, reach out, please. Dwayne's Horrifying Encounters episode, Lowell writes, Blair Lake down at the hot pool. We had a boulder thrown at us. I have had several run-ins with them. Please reach out. Relax writes on the Tennessee Bigfoot Stalker episode, that's an amazing story. Fascinating. I would love to hear his son's encounter. I almost got his son to come on the podcast. If the son is listening, please reach out again. I wasn't unable to hear a reply back from you, I believe. In the top 10 episode last year, Timothy writes, seems like they were so nice to country because they knew a good thing, right? I had a bear taken from me, but they didn't share. There was a large male, a young one about 4 feet tall, and an old lady, his grandmother, I would guess. I didn't push the issue, but that was the nicest black bear I'd ever taken. A bit frustrating. Would love to talk to you about this. Please reach out. Here's an interesting thing from the Dwayne episode. Lisa writes, you know you're in cougar territory if you smell cat urine. It smells exactly the same as domestic cats. The actual cougar doesn't really smell as like the domestic cats. They keep themselves clean. Really, the only time you may smell cat urine in the wilderness is if it's warm and humid or damp. Otherwise, it's hard to detect. Hey, that's good to know. Thank you. From the Pennsylvania police officer one here, Dirty writes, Bigfoot or Sasquatch doesn't exist. I grew up in a forest that supposedly has crazy, surreal sightings and evidence, yet no one that has lived out here for multiple decades has ever seen any evidence that they do exist. With all the tech advancement, there's no physical proof. Only campfire stories. If you agree with Dirty, let me know in the comments. Dale on the same episode writes, I lived in Allegheny County. I'm an avid hunter and fisherman. I know pretty much everything in the woods as I'm almost 60 and spent most of my life in nature. Only one thing I can't explain: while walking a trail off Route 15, the woods went completely silent, and I had this feeling something was watching me. As I kept scanning, I could see nothing. Then the hair stood up on my body, and I turned and ran. I booked it. I hunt, so when a bear or any large animal comes, the woods does not so silent. Never figured that one thing out in my life. Very interesting. Could have been something that happened there. Back to the Dwayne episode, Chris writes, when people are wandering through the woods at nights, projecting all these different vocalizations, I have no clue what these sounds actually mean to the creatures. Honestly, what did you expect? Okay, I get it. I mean, I have played the Sierra Sounds myself, and I experienced some really not enjoyable things. So yeah, I totally get it. It could be an interesting situation. We'll see what happens. Also on the Dwayne episode, Marnie writes, I know this is a Bigfoot channel, but I wish you'd asked him if he's ever seen or heard any sign of Dogman in his woods. That's another cryptid we really need to research because they're everywhere and becoming less and less afraid of being seen, which isn't good. I believe something terrible is going to happen. Look at all of the strange things going on. Okay, I struggle with this because I try to keep everything Bigfoot related, but let me know in the comments if you'd like to hear more about Dogman or what other things you would like to hear about, and I'll see what maybe I can do with that. It's kind of a tricky thing. In the TJ from Great Barrington episode, Steve writes, I lived in Sevierville, I always say that wrong, guys, Tennessee from 1998 till 2000, lived in Maryville, Tennessee from 2000 to 2017, now live in Madisonville, Tennessee. I don't go in the woods, period. All right, man, what have you experienced? Let me know. Please reach out. Darla on the police officer from Pennsylvania episode says, I'm from Northwest Pennsylvania, Bradford. I know of reports of sightings from Kinzua, Westline, Allegheny National Forest, Warren, Cook's Forest, Claremont. He is there. Darla, please reach out. I'd love to talk to you about what you've experienced. From the Dwayne episode, user writes, what TH? 23 foot. Bro, that sub-base Sasquatch has to be huge. I think that's about the biggest we've heard of. He's got to run upwards of 9 to 10 feet tall. Some have seen upward of 12 feet tall, over 1,000 pounds. Can you imagine? Our government are very aware of them. Well, guys, if there's going to be one that big, it's going to be out in the Pacific Northwest or British Columbia. So who knows, really? On the Dwayne episode, here's an interesting thing. User, and this one I'm going to edit a little bit as I read, just because. I feel so bad for him. I'm 64 and need a cane to do anything. My knees give right out. I used to do everything, be the first on point, headed into unknown territory. But once I became disabled, I feel just like he does. I've done the same thing, laid in tent, listening all night long. It's terrifying. Until a friend told me, have they killed you yet? Nope. Could they kill you? Yes, of course, I said. He says, then why worry? If they haven't killed you yet, then they aren't about that. I've actually heard from Native Americans who communicate with them. It's against their beliefs to attack, kill, eat us. Unless, yes, there's an unless, we attack first or harass their babies, young ones, etc. In other words, give them the same respect we expect from them. It's usually the teenagers of their groups, just like our teenagers who like to scare us, shake our tents, run by 10 at night, and scare us. LOL, relax, my friend. You'll find they start relaxing once we do because they see it's not scaring us any longer. It's boring for them. Try to communicate with them. Ask them not to scare you. You come in peace, bring gifts, leave them on one spot. I'll bet you any amount after a couple times you leaving stuff. Watch what happens. Sure enough, you'll get things you'll treasure the rest of your lives. God bless us all. Another thing, if they get too rowdy, use Jesus Christ's name, God, creator of all the universe. They have the same respect for God as we do. Peace from Big Jim in New Hampshire, a.k.a. Boston Strong. Thank you, Big Jim. If you have any specific incidents that you would want to share, please reach out, my friend. User Jake on a short I did about the Sipsy creature said, I've heard two of them talking to each other in Bankhead Forest. Sounded like two Asian cavemen arguing with each other. I've heard it for a good while. That day while I hunted, I got out of there. Please reach out. On Dwayne's Encounter episode, John writes, you remind me of a military doc who does counseling with combat veterans who are needing to decompress from horrific PTSD at times when you're interviewing these witnesses. Thank you, John. I take that as a compliment. I really try. On the Pennsylvania police officer episode, Misfit Gaming, I would love to talk about my experiences. I had a very intense up-close encounter in Boone, North Carolina. Please reach out. Had a really nice comment from Lyman on the real estate, Denny, the real estate agent episode. He says, best Bigfoot interviews on YouTube right here, folks. Really enjoy your channel. Thank you. I appreciate that. Tonto writes from the Pennsylvania police officer episode, what they call tree knocks on silly TV shows are actually raven vocalizations. The whoops are as well. I've run a wild rescue center 20 years and hear it every day. Every sound they claim to be Bigfoot is normal wildlife. Barred owls, coyotes, ravens, wolves, etc. I hear them all at my rescue center. So you would assume I'm a non-believer, right? I actually had an amazing encounter near Squamish, I believe that's Washington, 30 years ago, where I clearly saw a smaller one cross a very remote forest road right in front of my truck. Couldn't have been more than 5 feet tall. It looked directly into my headlights with an almost human-like face. It disappeared into the dense forest, and I just sat there stunned, trying to process what I just saw. I've never told anyone. Tonto, you're welcome to reach out, and if you'd like to discuss that with me, I would be privileged to chat with you about what you experienced. Levi writes the following on the Pennsylvania police officer episode. He says, here's my story. I was driving down the highway that goes east to west through Pennsylvania. We were going over the Appalachian mountain chains. I remember seeing a sign saying, you have reached the highest point in Pennsylvania. Another 30 minutes of driving, I enjoyed looking out my window as my father drives. A bit of backstory is the nearest exit was 50 miles away, and we hadn't passed anything for quite some time. No houses, no exits, nothing but wood and mountains. I see a bunch of deer in a 700 to 800 yard long field that was 200 to 300 yards wide. With woods surrounding the entire field, the field came directly to the highway and was downhill from us. We were driving to Rhode Island from Pennsylvania, so it was like 10 a.m. where there was barely any traffic. And I saw about 20 deer start running like they just got shot at. As a hunter, you can tell when deer are legitimately spooked and scared for their life, opposed to just running. So I go, Dad, look, a bunch of deer. His response when he looks over is, no, son, that's a Bigfoot. Well, what I hadn't seen because I was fixated on deer was a bipedal, completely hairy human figure sprinting at roughly 30 to 35 miles per hour toward the deer. This Bigfoot was gaining on deer, and the deer were in tall grass up to the neckline of the deer. The whole time the Bigfoot was running, we could see its knees, so we slowed down to like 40 miles per hour as we were on a highway, couldn't legally pull over or stop. This was unfortunately before smartphone era. Flip phones did have cameras, but they didn't record video. To this day, my dad and I swear on what we saw. Levi, please reach out. I'd love to chat with you about that. From Harley's episode, Terrifying Tales of the Smoky Mountains, Banjo writes, we have a lot of dogman reports at LBL, Land Between the Lakes, here in Tennessee, Bigfoot also. Please reach out with what you know, my friend. Going back to Stalked in the Meadows, 395, Relax says, heard a few stories in Fruitdale, Texas. I live 35 minutes from there. Please reach out if you haven't already. Saltpeter writes on Never Go Camping in This Area episode, representing the 603. All right, I didn't know we had these creatures in New Hampshire until one screamed, roared at me out in the woods 6 or 7 years ago. New Hampshire native from the hills. I know what animals we have and what they sound like. This was huge. It lasted a crazy long time, and it changed octaves from low to super high and very loud. I felt it in my body. I knew immediately that I experienced the sound of a Bigfoot. Very exciting, but I was scared as well. It was a vocalization telling me and my companions to get out of its territory. Simple. Absolutely. Reach out, my friend. Robbie writes on the Michael Mays episode, a black panther wreaked havoc on several farms in northeast Oklahoma, where I'm from, when I was a young man in my 20s. I never saw it because I was living in Tulsa by then, but my aunt and uncle both saw it, and it was eventually shot and killed. I guess none of us realized it was supposed to be controversial. My grandmother told stories of seeing them in the past as well. I suppose most people who lived in the hills of northeast Oklahoma saw them at some point. Be curious if anyone else has seen a black panther in that area. I don't necessarily want to discuss those sightings, but I'm curious if other people have had those. You can leave those in the comments. Back to the the re-release of the William Morris episode Sasquatch Fought a Bear and I Found the Body. Sean writes, I'm from Myrtle Creek myself. I had my own encounter in Oakland, just a bit north of Roseburg. Please reach out, my friend. A lot of people like the Connie Bigfoot Ranch episodes. Hopefully there's more to come from that. And there's going to be a few comments from that series so far. Kristen writes, I really enjoyed Connie's stories. She is what we need in the Sasquatch world for answers. I have so many questions, though. Questions like, what do they do with their dead? Why do some look human, some gorilla, some orangutan? We know she and her family can communicate with them, so I don't doubt this at all. But why? When we have hope for people like her to give us answers, because very little scientists will, do we still not get real answers of what they know or think? At the end of the day, we heard just great stories, but nothing more than we already heard about others' encounters in the past. She has so much she can teach everyone. So why is it the same? I'm only going to tell you what you already know, but nothing more. Okay, I get your frustration. There's more coming, hopefully, so stay tuned. Under Siege by Sasquatch in Central Tennessee episode. Viking says, I live in Cookeville, Tennessee. I'm going Bigfoot hunting. Let me know what you got going on. Please be careful. We don't want a missing 411 situation. Here's an interesting comment that came in from Diana on Bigfoot Ranch Part 2. Southern Illinois, Shoal Creek near Missouri border in Appanoose County and Dean Bottoms in Appanoose County was a hotspot for them in the 60s and 70s. Also a few UFO sightings down there around those times. That's really cool. Diana, please reach out to me. I would love to discuss that. That's a time period where a lot of the information is being lost because that generation is starting to unfortunately get into their years where they're having maybe issues remembering. You get what I'm trying to say. Bigfoot Ranch Part 1. Donito says, so interesting. I grew up in Davis County, Iowa, which borders Van Buren County. Our farm was on the east side of the county, which made us even closer. I've also lived in Jefferson County and Henry County. Both, again, border Van Buren. I've never had an encounter, but have always been fascinated with stories about them. I can't remember the name of the show, but it came out in the mid-'70s, and it was about Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster. Just the preview scared me to death. My older sister assured me that there were no Bigfoot where we lived. She told me that they lived out in the boonies, and I had nothing to worry about. I'm thinking she may have been wrong. I also had a friend who had a winery, a farm, and some other businesses in the Dowds area. He led hunting parties on his farm. I'm willing to bet he has some stories. Have him reach out, please. Really enjoyed this. It makes a difference when you know exactly where the places are that the encounters happen. I'd love to hear more from Connie and sightings in Southeast Iowa. I will try to make that happen. Interesting trivia fact from Bigfoot Ranch Part 2. O Negative writes, a floodlight is called a booger light in the South. All right, cool. That's really awesome to know. I didn't know that. From Denny the Real Estate, Sonia writes, my mom was born and raised in Tallahassee. I was telling some of these Bigfoot stories to her, and she was wondering if this was the booger man the old folks used to warn the kids about. Ding, ding, ding. I guess it was. I would guess it was. Sonia, if you could have your mom maybe reach out, or maybe even write down some things that she would be willing to share, or even record her, just so you have that that time recorded of your mom's history. Be very interesting for you to be able to listen to in the future. Bigfoot Ranch Part 2. Lorianne writes, yeah, contradictive. So they braided horses' manes and tails, but now he's saying they're freaking out horses. Horses are fight or flight. No, I trained, judged, showed my whole life. I also lived with them on my property. I know Mary Green and Bobby Short, Scott Patterson too, plus more. Okay. Interesting. Lorianne, feel free to contact me. I would love to hear what you've experienced. On the Pennsylvania Pennsylvania police officer encounter episode, V. Shaman writes, up in the Finger Lakes area of New York, I absolutely have seen them out in line on 2 occasions, reported it and was told we didn't have them. The second ones, I've actually been able to find tracks even. Long before cell phones with good cameras, though, so don't get excited, guys. First of all, the Wildlife Commission doesn't know and how they try to act like they actually do. For some of these things kind of blow my mind. Like these things have borders that they won't cross, yet they don't have that. They have natural borders, that's it. So with our weather going all over the place like it does, I'd imagine that we're going to have things rearranged all over. But this was long before that. And while you could have a pretty small population of mountain lions and have it go under the radar very easily in places. Very interesting. Reach out. It sounds like you have some things. Here's an interesting thought from Bigfoot Ranch Part 1, The Marlboro Man. Migratory, rivers. My mother can't wear watches because they stop working after a while. The bit about the car ceasing to function made me think of that. Not saying my mom is a Bigfoot, saying there might be something there, something quantifiable. Maybe if we understood the biomechanism better, might help in finding them easier. Don't even know how to measure it. Need to spend some time figuring out what spectrum of light the standard camera film of back in the day could pick up. What wavelengths interfere with the image. They can mess with it. Could mean they have a better control of metabolic functions, capable of radiating energy at particular wavelengths. Just a thought. Guys, if you have any thoughts regarding that, that's a really interesting statement, group, and let me know in the comments what you think. Also from Bigfoot Ranch Part 1, from Paula, I absolutely love this interview with Connie. Such a wonderful, fabulous, and interesting woman to hear all or some of her encounters with Shapinga and how she helped Connie while those awful men tried to have... tried to be not nice guys. How about that? Such a horrible shame. Whoever stole all her Bigfoot stories, photos, I agree. Experiences Connie kept in a journal. She must have had so many awesome experiences. I also agree. Connie is so interesting. I would love to hear more from her. Connie, it truly is so honest and lovely. Love to listen to. Thank you. Yeah, that's a really nice comment. And I agree. I would love to see any evidence Connie has, but she did lose so much of it. Here's an interesting comment that actually came on the YouTube membership video from Steve. I'm currently living in southeast Iowa. I live close to the Van Buren County line in Davis County. We're real rural out here, at least 12 miles in any direction to the nearest towns, which Eldon, Florist, Bloomfield, and Keosauqua. Only been out here since end of March, but let me tell you, there's something out here. Caught a glimpse of what looked like a silverback gorilla walking on all fours in the timber, probably 20 to 25 yards away. Its front legs, arms, and back legs were the only parts not seen because of high grass, which was up to my hips and sometimes my chest. I'm 5'8". No cattle, sheep, deer, nor the mountain lion I saw a month before. Had no tail, hair about 6 to 8 inches long, kind of wavy, dark brown, about the waist, and gray silver from the hips. That's really interesting. I've never heard that before. No one in this area seems surprised to hear me say this. I think they just keep it to themselves for the animal's sake. Steve, please reach out to me. I'm going to say the email one more time. It's bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Wow, this is just happening recently in the same area. Please, Steve, reach out. I would love to talk to you. Bigfoot Ranch, Part 1. Donna says, I believe her. They can speak any language. Yes, they talk to you telepathically. I believe her. They will follow you where you go. Yes, they are an ancient race. I love them. They are part human. Donna, thank you for your kind thoughts. Pennsylvania police officer episode. Victoria writes, I live on Vancouver Island, a Bigfoot hotspot. I live on top of a mountain on 11 acres and have had many cougars, bears, and even a wolf last month. But sadly, no BF yet. Well, don't give up hope and let me know. Please reach out if something happens. On the same episode, Paul writes, I've seen huge trunks being thrown out of a forest ridgeline and couldn't believe my eyes. I didn't comprehend what was happening. I heard a roar that sent shivers across my whole body, and I was with 4 buddies out for a hunt. We left the area immediately, and we felt like we were being stalked and warned. This roar sounded like a deep growl that literally was felt in my bones. This was up in the New York-Pennsylvania border. Very interesting, Paul. Please feel free to reach out. Cynthia, writing on the, this is an old one. This is 263 Oklahoma episode, I think. She writes, I know there have been a lot of sightings in Oklahoma, but I think Bigfoot might have got someone. Okay, yeah, well, yeah, totally. Personally, I think if you are trying to get a Bigfoot and take one out, you need to be absolutely careful because its brother, if you take it out, its brothers will take you out. That's just, it's like the whole Jurassic Park thing. Take out the raptors are going to come from the side. Sorry, Muldoon. I think there's a lot of people that have probably done that did not come back, and that might be the whole missing 411. I don't know. Let me know what your comments are in the comments of this episode. I'm sure there's going to be just some discussion about this. Bigfoot Ranch Part 1. Ruptured Duck writes, will members-only content eventually be made available to your regular subscribers? So I get a question like this every so often, so I'm going to address it again. Members-only content is members-only content that is for the individuals that choose to support the podcast, which I really appreciate all those individuals. A lot of people say, hey, that's not fair. Well, guys, here's the thing. I appreciate those that are able to support the podcast. This doesn't run by itself. There are bills to pay for the podcast. And so if you are able to help support, there's going to be extra things for members. So members only things, members only content, which there's an episode that comes out every week, will not be made public ever. And you can become a YouTube channel member, tier 2, Bigfoot Posse, to hear those episodes. You can become a Patreon member. There's a great community over there, and you get to hear the extra stuff. So that's really what it comes down to. Episode 461, My House Was Attacked in Astoria. There's a lot of really interesting comments that came in on that. Sunshine Bear writes, they can cloak, so it could have been Bigfoot inside your house looking like a shadow figure. Ooh, that's pretty creepy to think of. It's got to be related to the bones found, the orange orbs, and everything happening around your house. I'll bet they've been keeping tabs on you. Sunshine Bear, you might not be too far off. Bigfoot Ranch Part 1. Okay, this one is a great comment. This probably wins comment of the whole group. Nitro Border writes, this is such a great episode. It's important to hear the stories and accounts from the older generations before their loss. I find the stories people who are in their mid-70s and older have incredible accounts that really don't get spoken on much over the course of their lives because it was such a different time. Even today, as times have changed, people have become more open to talking about things in general, and there's more awareness of the Bigfoot creature. For example, I had the most random encounter with an older woman while I was visiting Oregon at the North American Bigfoot Center. I checked it out with my brother who lives out there, and we were poking around the little gift shop area in the front of the museum and chatting a bit with some of the employees about Sasquatch. This little old lady came in, was just looking around for a minute or two when she speaks up to the employee we'd been talking to when there was a lull in our conversation. She said that when she was a young girl, somewhere between ages of 6 to 10, I forgot what age she said, but it was in the early 1950s, when her father told her this story that apparently had taken place in 1940s to him. She said that her father was a logger by trade. He was working a job site somewhere in California. I also don't remember where she said it was, but they were doing tree work, logging it, stacking very, very large fallen trees with heavy machinery. One morning, her father and the crew returned to the job site, and those huge logs were strewn all around the area, just absolutely tossed around the work site. We're talking massive trees, trunks that no person or even group of men could have moved or thrown around like that, like they were found that way that morning. So she told the story, and it was pretty wild to hear from her. She told it to us as we stood there listening, and she said she wondered if it could have been a Bigfoot. She said her dad didn't indicate it was some sort of monster or Bigfoot, or that there were any stories related to it. She also pointed out that when this incident occurred, and when she was told about it, that there wasn't a talk about Bigfoot like we see today, which that makes sense to me. I mean, there's stories, legends, accounts of Bigfoot creatures going back for thousands of years, but it didn't really come into the larger modern culture consciousness and zeitgeist as it did since arguably around the time of the Patterson-Gimlin footage. Just crazy to hear her story from a time decades before Bigfoot was growing in popularity awareness, relatively speaking. So yeah, she just told that story to us and wondered out loud if it could have been a Bigfoot, and we were all like, oh wow, that's really interesting. And she wished us well and left. Like she was just passing through and stopped in and told us the minute or two long story and left, basically, like she wanted to get it out there. That is incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that, Nitro Border. That's awesome. Let's continue. I talk about a geographic square in the Denny real estate agent episode, Timor writes, I live in that square. Well, let me know if you've experienced anything. Please reach out. Going back to the Under Siege by Sasquatch in central Tennessee, 8646 Aaron writes, my family has property in Tennessee. I used to camp there a few days a week when we were doing a lot of work there to avoid having to drive there. So I camp on a very steep ridge right where it drops off a little bluff. One night I heard something that sounded like tree knocking way up on the ridge behind me. It was far enough I never even mentioned it to anyone. The next week I heard it again, but it was a lot closer. It would go on for 30 minutes, then stop. The week following, it started knocking about 50 yards. It sounded like someone was smacking a tree with a baseball bat. Again, it went on for about 30 minutes. Now I'm literally in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing about this place. Right off the side of this bluff, I'm going to guess I'd put a big flat rock that I had my tent set up on. Oh, you probably found it. So I couldn't even see over the ledge behind me to see what it was. I had a little LED light that used one AA battery that continually flickered on and off. So I wasn't seeing anything anyways. The following week, I put a tarp over my tent using poles. The tarp went all the way to the ground and had logs on top of it to hold it down. That week, whatever it was, started pulling the tarp up, making the logs kind of bounce on the rock at the same time. Oh my goodness, this is wild. I smacked the side of my tent and yelled, hey. 3 to 5 seconds later, something hit a tree right behind me 3 times hard. I about had a stroke. Absolutely, I would have too. For 20 minutes, it moved around behind me, smacking trees sporadically. It started getting closer to me again. So I shot my .40 cal out the front of my tent into another range across from me, and that ended it. I haven't heard knocking ever since. I wondered if it was someone trying to live off the grid because my camp looked over springs that was year-round source of water. I don't know, but I'm fine with it stopping. 8646 Aaron, reach out, please. I need to talk to you about this. It's very interesting. Here's a great comment from the Denny episode, Real Estate Agent. Chris writes, Denny showed us 3 properties in 2021. The last one, a 10-acre area near Robbers Cave, had obvious signs of Bigfoot. Trees broke over 90 degrees at about 7 feet up. Nest-looking structures. He ain't lying, folks. We asked him about them, and he was very matter-of-fact that Bigfoot was in the area. Awesome interview with a good guy. Chris, that is so cool. Thank you for sharing that. That makes my day. Pennsylvania police officer. This one's a long one, so get ready. Shake and Break writes, I grew up in Pleasantville, PA, and right in my backyard was the unofficial Allegheny National Forest. My Grandpa Sparks, who had a Wolf's Head gas station in the 60s to early 80s, and when I was super little, I would ride on his fuel oil route with him through Tianesta, Tideout, Pit Hole, Nealtown, and so on. And at some remote homes, I would wander about the property sometimes. And out between Nealtown and Tideout, I was wandering about this field heading for the tree line. I was 6, and it was 1981. While my grandpa was filling an oil tank for home heating, when this old woman came running out of her house screaming at my grandpa to get him away from the woods. In hearing her, I stopped and turned back when I heard a large crash in the woods behind me. It sounded like a tree came down through the thick branches of the surrounding trees with the sounds of breaking branches. The swoosh of the leaves slashing through the branches, then a thud that I could feel through my feet. They must have seen something I didn't because my grandma switched off the hose and sprinted toward me. I've never seen my grandpa run before or after. He got to me, scooped me up in his arms, and trod back to his gas truck, a big old red Dodge oil truck. And as he put me in the cab, the woman said that you just can't go wandering off because there are things out there that grab you and you'd never be seen again. I was terrified, and her words have stayed with me my entire life. I overheard them between my sobs talking as my grandpa finished filling her tank, that they have always been a problem that time of year. Early fall, I was wearing a sweater and a corduroy coat, and that her and her husband think that they make a yearly circle through mountains loosely following the Allegheny River and tributaries, and that they must be heading back to the caves at Tianesta. She went on to say that her neighbors throughout the area have had the same problems too, and she made the guess by the pattern of what homes are visited in what direction. Growing up in the woods, especially the late summer months, it wasn't uncommon for me and my friends who lived in Daly's Trailer Park, which was through the back field from my house that was on Route 36, to hear tree knocks. We would hear one off in the distance, then a little while later, another one off to the left, deep in the woods. then another one off to the right a little while later. My grandpa had 11 brothers and sisters whom I spent a lot of time with growing up, and the best advice I ever received was from my uncle Pete, who said, "Whenever you hear the woods go silent, it's time to go home." I have a few other Bigfoot stories, especially how my mom, brother, and I was followed by an adult male in pit hole, who I saw as my mom carried me back to the car, but I'll save that for another time. I will leave you with a white Bigfoot sighting in Guys Mills, PA, who wanders from Corey, Spartansburg, Gus Mills, Meadville, PA areas. She has been seen by some very prominent people, but won't say much about their encounter. Shake and break. Please reach out to me, bigfootsociety@gmail.com. I would love to talk to you, my friend. Oh my goodness. He puts another comment in on this. I have a few more. One really interesting, terrifying one. Two actually that happened to me not too long after my encounter with my grandpa. The tree knocks I can attest to as being a common occurrence when I was young. I would even hear them when I was in bed at night. Old gas wells, when operation, would make a pop sound, then a chugga chugga, then pop, chugga chugga chugga. So when I would hear the pop of the tree knock, which sounded an awful lot like the oil well that was deep in the woods across Route 36, I would distinctly know the difference. The funny thing is that while writing this, I just realized that it was such a common occurrence in the summer months around my house that it was normal, and I didn't think twice about it. I'll talk to my 84-year-old mother and my older brother tonight and see what they remember. I know they remember the one where I think he was trying to take me. Wow. Oh, man, dude, shake and break. You had got to reach out, please. From the Denny episode, real estate agent Seth writes, my hunting buddy I've known for 20 years is an outdoorsman, 100%. He taught us all to hunt and fish better. In the early 1980s, he was hunting in the Olympic Mountains called Wyandotte Valley, saw an upright, hairy creature, not a bear. They exit the scene. If you can reach out to your hunting buddy, please have him reach out to me. I would love to talk to him. From the Pennsylvania police officer, Happy Lost Souls writes, I've experienced something bizarre in Northwest PA deep off the grid. I can only liken it to infrasound. I was paralyzed and disoriented from some sound I wasn't hearing, but I was feeling. It triggered a massive fear response with me. I do not know what this is. I only know that large predators can generate infrasound. Happy Lost Souls, I'm 100% sure I've experienced what you experienced just about a month ago. And I know it is hard to live without talking to someone about it. If you want to reach out to me, I would love to talk to you about what happened. In an older episode, the Alabama Hunter Found episode, Perry writes, this is a little longer one, so get ready, guys. Okay, here we go. My family and I went camping in Alabama, but I don't remember exactly where. I was only 8 when my parents and I experienced a Bigfoot encounter. Anyways, we used our little boat to get to this location to camp because the walk would have taken too long lugging all our stuff. After we set the tent, made a fire, ate, and got settled down for the night, I was getting really sleepy. My mom carried me in the tent and I was out. It felt like minutes when my dad said, "Get up now." There was something that sounded like a monster nearby, and my dad said, "We need to leave now." I was inside our small aluminum boat running as fast as I could. We left, that part is a little weird, but I'm going to go with it. We left everything there, everything. Not even a flashlight to see where we were going. There were trees and rocks we saw on our way so I was afraid we'd hit something and drown. It was still dark and we couldn't see anything. Sure enough, we ran into boats so they were in the boat. And the boat started taking water. I said we're going to die because we could still hear it screaming, talking gibberish. We still kept going with the boat leaking badly. Thankfully, Dad made a bailing bucket using a Clorox bottle before we left just in case. Thank goodness. My mother bailed water out because it was coming in faster than she could bail the water out. I was scared to death and my mom was crying too. It felt like hours trying to escape. Finally, my dad thought we were far enough away and pulled to the shore to look at the damage. We heard it off in the distance, but it sounded far away. We sat in the boat for a few minutes and I started calming down and felt better. My mom was still upset, wanting to know what happened and why we left everything behind. My dad and mom walked a few feet away, and I heard my dad whispering to my mother saying he thought Bigfoot threw a rock at him. What else can throw rocks? I said, I heard you, Dad. Now I was more scared. He said he'd walked downstream to pee and was hit in the back with a rock. He yelled, "Who's out there?" That's when the thing started screaming loudly. As I was sitting in the boat, wondering if we were going to stay where we were, I remember I was being bit by mosquitoes. My dad wedged a piece of wood in the hole where we ran over a sharp rock and hoped that would stop the water. I wanted to leave so bad. All of a sudden, we heard trees sounding like they were snapping, and the screaming started again, sounding like this thing was really close. They followed us. We were all screaming as my dad once again was pushing the boat in the water to start the engine. He was pulling the rope to start it, and it wouldn't start. The only weapon we had was a fire extinguisher my mother was ready to use. My father was pulling and pulling. We all see two Bigfoot not more than 50 feet away. They were enormous and growling at us. I started praying to God, asking for help. I was sobbing, hiding under the seat, ready to die. It got real quiet, and all of a sudden the boat started and we took off. A few minutes later, the sun started poking out and we could see land from shore. We made it to the area where we parked the truck. Not one word was spoken. My father went to the ranger station just in time as two rangers pulled up. My dad was shaken and worried they would all think we're crazy, but they didn't think we were crazy at all because they had had an experience too. I never asked what happened. My dad told me and my mom to get back in the truck so they could talk. There was a lady ranger there, and she let us stay inside the station when my dad and the rangers used another boat to retrieve our stuff at the campsite because my dad was scared to return by himself where we left it. They left and found the campsite untouched and returned safely back to the ranger station. I was happy to return home, and we never went camping again. We never spoke about it again. Years later, my mom and dad died, and I always wondered why they just stopped when they were close enough to kill us. I went to the library and researched Bigfoot encounters and read Campers Who Prayed to God Saved Them from Physical Attack. It sure worked that day. Oh my goodness. That is the most... There's some really interesting, wild stories. Perry, thank you for sharing that. I can't imagine going through that myself. Please reach out to me if you are up to it. And I know this is an extremely wild situation that you had to go through. I would love to talk to you about it. You can reach out to me, bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Here's an interesting comment coming in on the Astoria attack episode from Andrew. I'm going to probably edit it a little bit. Astoria is a funny place. I personally enjoy it. Aside from all the extra BS that I'm not sure what that is, attract in the Fort Stevens area. Talk to the local hunters and loggers, and they have stories. Ever heard of any cult-like rituals taking place near Fort Relia in the area that borders Fort Stevens? We found a pile of deer skeletons arranged in a pentagram and encountered a large wolf-like dog once. Oh my goodness, Andrew. Maybe reach out. Reach out. We can chat. It would fill in some blanks about the area. James writes, I was born there in 73. I can tell you some things. I lived there by the fort and what happened right before the Mount St. Helens blast and what happened to us and two other families. Give me a call. James, I don't have a way to give you a call, brother. I don't know your phone number. So please, James, reach out. If you've got stuff that happened around the Mount St. Helens blast, I'm going to say, maybe do you know something about the Bigfoot that were taken by the helicopters? I'm not going to assume, but I am going to wish that you would contact me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. The Denny episode, Hotwire Man, writes, I live in Puto. I know I'm mispronouncing that, guys. I apologize. I live in Puto, close to Kavanaugh Hill in northeast Lafleur County, not too far from Fort Smith, Arkansas. I was super scared when I first moved here. It's an old creek with lots of thick woods. I saw lots of tree limbs leaning up at an angle and some lying on the ground in an A shape. I don't go out at night. Please reach out to me. Here's another one from Andrew. I've had some strange experiences near Fort Relia, and the Coast Guard constantly runs drills due to the Columbia River Bar being such a treacherous area, but I'm telling you, there's definitely activity near Fort Stevens and most definitely near Olney and that area off the Clascanine and deeper towards Jewel. Andrew, you got to reach out, dude. Off to the side, Robert writes, off topic, wasn't Goonies filmed in Astoria? Yeah, it was. So is Kindergarten Cop. 2 great 80s movies. Rock on. Greg writes on the Pennsylvania police officer. He says, I've had multiple sightings while on an expedition in the Allegheny National Forest in the Kinzua Dam area. Craig, reach out. I'd love to talk to you about it. Cynthia writes, same episode, mountain lion has a super loud, hellacious scream followed by 3 perfectly spaced, deep coughs. This series may be repeated several times. Wildlife biologist here, Foothills of Cascades, said he was unsure if their calls are territorial or mating. Seen and heard them several times. It's blood-curdling. Cynthia, would love to talk to you if you have any Bigfoot information. Sounds really, really interesting. Here's a fun one. Why not? On a members-only episode, individual writes, gonna have to unsub. Can't stand channels who hide content for money. You know what? We've already addressed this, but dude, if you want to see the content continue and grow, and Bigfoot Society is going places, we're going to the moon. It's the price of a cup of coffee, dude. It's less than going to McDonald's once a month. So that's all I'm going to say. Let's keep going. Pennsylvania police officer MK says, been to Allegheny National Forest. If there was going to be one in PA, that's the spot. Feels like you go back in time. Huge undiscovered area. Very interesting. Here we go. User writes, hey, I grew up in the Poconos. My dad and I saw Bigfoot twice, full up close from maybe 15 feet. The hands about 8 foot tall. Terrible smell, but they're highly intelligent and have their own language. We got them on film at our cabin once, but a solar flare that day wiped all the hard drives. Isn't that always the case? You always get that, and then they get wiped out. We report the footprints to the police, and the police say they know and have an unofficial do not report Bigfoot stuff, even though they said they get it all the time. User, please reach out to me. I would love to talk to you. Alrighty then. Ooh, rocking my car back and forth down in Florida. Richie writes, this experience didn't happen to myself, but in October 2023, one of our contracted dump truck drivers was shaken like a pinball in the cab of his truck. This happened near Mayaca State Park, close to the new Braves Trying Stadium. I'm not surprised at all. I hope he's okay. Here we go. Here is a pretty long one from the Astoria episode. Bear to Fruits says, I live very close to Astoria, Oregon, right on the Columbia River. About 2 years ago, I found out there is a waterfall close by, so my mom, daughter, and I went to find it. On the way, my mom had to use the bathroom, so we stopped. We decided to hike up an old logging road, and while walking, we all noticed a horrible smell. It smelled worse than death. Off the road, next to an embankment, we spotted something I've never seen before. It was something that had been killed a day or two before. I can only describe it as a bear, wolf, lion, man. It was huge. Way too big to be a wolf or bear. It looked like it walked bipedal. It was muscular like a man. Its paws were not paws, but more like digits with long claws. It was bearing huge teeth. The face looked very wolf-like, but it had a mane like a lion. It had wire-like thick brown hair. We all knew this was something evil or ominous. We rushed out of there and avoided the area. I'm haunted by so many questions. What was it? What killed it? Are there more of them? Do they hurt people? Why hadn't other animals eaten it? How long had it been there? How did it get there? Here's what I do know. These things are huge, scary, and real. Then there's some stuff that could potentially get me kicked off the platform. So I'm not going to say that, but you can track down the comment if you want to read some more. Bear to Fruits, reach out to me. I would love to talk to you more about that. And if you have photos of what you saw, and I hope you're okay, because that would be very hard to deal with. On the Boundary Waters episode, ATAS says, myself and another family member had 2 different stories of encounters in the past few years. One very close to this area. Please reach out. Here we go. in the Denny Real Estate Sunshine Bear again. I'm in Central Arkansas with family in Tennessee, and I'm so curious if any of my family members have any stories. My uncle is a real estate agent of farms and lands now, but used to run a hunting lodge in Carlisle, Arkansas, so I'm sure he's seen something. Lots of family in Louisiana, too. One of my great aunts has a exotic animal farm there. Well, reach out with what you find, my friend. Here's a good comment from Tap into Alignment on the My Dog Was Hanging from a Limb 12 feet up. Mark, you saved those ladies' lives and perhaps others by telling your experience, and your boy saved yours. Your account was one of the most rattling I've heard. I agree. It is right up there. I hope the trauma will calm and you can find joy again in the small things. Please take heart that you will see your best companion again. I know this is true. He will either come back to you in this life, but you can count on him waiting as you cross over someday. What a marvelous reunion that will be. Very interesting, but an encouraging comment for Mark. Thank you. Pennsylvania police officer. I've had one roar at me at the trailhead coming down from Lake Isabel in Gold Bar, Washington. It was so loud it shook my chest, and there are TP structures all over the place up there. Username is You're Not My Master. Reach out, please, if you'd like. My house was attacked in Astoria. Gregory writes, it's been said that certain frequency sounds and certain light subdue them. I think they can also hear our electronics and their frequencies, and that's how they elude trail cams and also can make it very difficult to get a clear picture of them. Absolutely, 100%, my friend. Yes, I am on board. Here we go. Same episode, JPV writes, I just moved into my mom's house to take care of her after my stepdad's passing. The dog will bark uncontrollably in the middle of the night, which it never used to. There's a cabin in the woods behind her place with a small driveway going to it through the woods. In the past week, I've heard 2 trees fall. The first tree I could see, and it was directly across their driveway. The second I couldn't see, but it sounded like it would be across the driveway as well. I know these things can be easily explained, but as I sit here in Bath, New Hampshire, and the sun's starting to get down, it feels like something more is going on. Spooky. Edit. Almost forgot the best part. Before the first tree fell across their driveway, I heard something smacking one of the sap buckets. Use those to make maple syrup. Like it was hitting it almost. I heard it hit the ground, and then it sounded like it was dragged or carried through the woods, getting quiet as it moved further away. Do bear get into sap buckets? I know they could knock a tree down, but it still has me thinking. Interesting. From the Astoria episode, Kendra writes, I lived in Astoria, Oregon for 24 years. I graduated from high school in Astoria, married my first husband, and had my 3 children at Columbia Memorial Hospital. I never encountered Bigfoot there, but I've been hearing about Bigfoot encounters from Astoria recently. So fascinating. It's not that comment, although I appreciate that comment. It's the comment in response to it that I think is very interesting from Krissa. I lived at 15 miles east of Astoria, about 20 miles west of Rainier, Oregon. Remember Rainier, Oregon, guys? From 1971 to 1975. During that time, there was a rash of encounters by something we called the growler. It chased several kids I went to school with. It was said to kill small livestock. The old-timers in this area referred to something they called the Wild Man of Nicolai Mountain. We all knew about Sasquatch, but back then everyone thought it was only in the Cascade Mountain Range. So the growler and the Wild Man of Nicolai Mountain were just assumed to be something else. What that was, nobody had a guess. In the late 70s, my sister's teacher's wife claimed to have seen a baby Sasquatch sitting in a tree near Astoria. Now, back then, one was considering a raving kook to even bring up the subject. People were shamed into silence. I'm not surprised this woman has not met any locals. My great-grandparents homesteaded in this area in the late 1800s, and to this day, outsiders are not welcome. I never saw the growler, but in 1993, I had an encounter near Zigzag, OR, Oregon, in the Mount Hood National Forest. Very fleeting, nothing very exciting. I know 3 people who've had encounters, one in Afghanistan when the man was a child, herding goats, one in the Mount Hood National Forest, and one near Yakima, Washington. My friend, you are more than welcome to reach out. I would love to talk to you, Krisa. Also, feel free to pass on my info to any of those individuals that you know that have also had encounters. That also goes to anyone listening. All right. Next, this is back face-to-face, New England woods, Bigfoot encounters. Esther writes, first sighting experiences in Berkshire's Mass while quadding, then in Andover, Connecticut. Please reach out, Esther. Views from below writes, I'm from Andover and will confirm they are definitely in our woods. Bishop Swamp, Gay Cities State Park area is their home base, I believe. Very interesting. Would love to hear more. Dwight writes on, I believe this is Salt Fork State Park episode. My grandparents lived in Guernsey County right off STRT, that's probably State Route 93 by Wills Creek. Definitely a Sasquatch there. I saw it when I was young fishing the creek. I never ran so fast in my life back up the hill to the trailer they lived in. Grandpa said not to go back down the hill the rest of the day. He said it wouldn't bother me if I didn't bother it. Interesting. Please reach out. Great Barrington episode. Aaron writes, I used to live in Western Mass. I mean, I still do, but I used to too. Rip Mitch Hedberg. That's funny. Went camping a handful of times in the area of the Berkshires when I was a kid, but primarily commercial camping areas or with a Boy Scout troop or whatever, LOL. So I never got to see anything, although I have heard some strange howls and screeching near my house a couple times. I want to go squatching up the Quabbin Reservoir sometime. Wild area. Why not? I bet there's something out there. People have allegedly found prints in that area. I mean, the Quabbin is so big. If it's going to be somewhere, it might be around there. I don't know. Denny's real estate agent episode, D1 writes, when they talk, it sounds like Mandarin. On the movie Die Hard, when Bruce Willis pushes the detonators in the elevator shaft and the guys are talking, it sounds similar to that, kind of like a deep voice person speaking French. All right, cool. Let's all watch Die Hard again for Bigfoot research. Same episode, Drucifer writes, my mom grew up in rural Georgia, born in 1929. She called them woolly boogers or wood boogers. Wasn't a big deal. They were just there. Very interesting. Pennsylvania police officer Gypsy writes, I'm from Noxon. It's a very small reclusive village in northeast PA. The stuff I could tell you. I'm a grandmother now, but when I was young, we lived in the hollows. Those mountains are different. They are old, and there are places in the hollows that feel dark like a doorway. And when you walk through there you are giving permission for interaction with that wilderness. The hollows are where the real wild things are. Sounds and animals and creatures that you think are normal because everyone you know co-signs it because they think it's normal too. What you grow up in hearing and seeing. Then you grow up and move into the larger world of towns and cities and realize none of it was normal. It's like growing up in another world. Gypsy, please reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you if you're up for it about what you've experienced. Todd leaves on the Boundary Water episode. I recently heard a story of BF in the town of Pony at the base of the mountain. Not to mention a lot of hunters go missing hunting elk. 411 stuff. Would love to hear more, Todd. In Revenge of the Sierra Sasquatch, Lay Knight writes, I love this report and discussion more than I can tell you. I believe that it will help many people to come forward with their encounters. I've had some life-changing experiences with these mysterious, elusive, amazing creatures myself in California, Oregon, and Canada. I've not shared them on open forum due to naysayer petulance, but each experience has made an incredible, indelible imprint on my life. Jeremiah, I love your show. You're an excellent host. My utmost appreciation to both you and your guest. Lay Night, thank you so much for sharing that. You are welcome to reach out if you would like to discuss what has happened. Here's a really interesting comment from Dale in the Astoria episode. Kind of edit it a little bit. I can think of 8 stories off the top of my head where Sasquatches attacked residents in their homes, but that one story 5 years ago where these individuals were cooking, think Breaking Bad, on this property that had a 7-mile dirt road way back in the boondocks. The sheriff saw all these missing persons posters on the downtown business walls, light poles, bulletin boards, knew something was up. They were all Hispanic farm workers in Northern California. They received a 911 call by a child saying monsters were attacking their families in a double-wide trailer. Police and sheriff department were on the way up this dirt road. Dispatchers stated that she could hear automatic weapons being fired, people screaming to the sheriff personnel. Sounded like the building was being destroyed by a dozer. Officers arrived. The trailer back half was ripped outward. Bodies all over the place, torn, mangled. One little girl survived. The story she told was brutal. Her entire family plus other families were taken out by these monsters. That's wild. If you have more information about that, Dale, please reach out. X-File writes in a comment to that. He says, I grew up 15 miles outside of Astoria, Oregon. I would move as soon as possible. There are bad, negative vibes in that place. It rains all the time, and ever since I moved from there in 1988, my life has been much better. It's a dark, creepy place. Whoa. That is wild. We were being lured to the woods. Pirate writes, I wonder if people that have an early in-life sighting get connected somehow. Because I did and have had so many other encounters, and I can relate to the dreams. I will contact Jeremiah. I just want to write everything down in order. Pirate, I will be awaiting your email. Please take the time you need to figure things out. And we can talk about it. In the Boundary Waters episode, Natalie writes, I'm a Minnesotan. Yeah, we head straight up north every chance we get. I'm from Minneapolis, but my dad is from Park Rapids. Growing up, I spent my summers up there, and Bigfoot would throw rocks at us while we were walking through the woods. He revealed himself a few times to my dad, and he shook the trailer they lived in too. Natalie, please reach out. I'd love to talk to you about that. Denny's episode, Mike writes, I'm a logger and drive a log truck. I live north of Clarksville, Texas. We have them here in Northeast Texas. Yeah, you do. And of course, Southeast Oklahoma. We also log in the areas they're talking about. Yes, they're here, and some of them are very aggressive. Mike, if you'd like to, please reach out. I would love to hear about what you've experienced if you want to share it. All right, here we go. Here's a pretty wild one. From Denny's real estate agent episode. XX writes, I'm in Clarksville, Tennessee, and I live right against 101st Fort Campbell, Kentucky base, which has wilderness going west for over an hour, all the way to land between the lakes, which is notorious for dogman and Bigfoot. So it is a possibility that one came by. I was feeding my outside cat at night around 10 p.m. I have a very, very small patch of woods behind the house that one technically could have been hiding in, but mostly wanted to say I have heard the metallic gate screech, closing, opening sound during what I believe was a dogman experience. As I was feeding the outside cat at night, I heard the craziest dog panting sound very close to me, but couldn't see anything. I did not tolerate it for more than a few seconds and then demanded it to leave in Jesus' holy name immediately. The third time I said it is when I heard a metal screech sound, as if it ran back to whatever portal it came from. It was gone, and not long after I was too. Maggie Cat is doing well. What also is weird about this is the fact that 4 months prior to this, I went out back and shined my flashlight around at 10 p.m. and I saw the biggest, brightest red eyes ever, 5 to 6 feet off the ground, 5 to 6 inch space between the eyes. They were as big as the red circular reflecting posts people buy to put by their mailboxes so no one hits it. I was in shock immediately. I know all of the animals around here, and it did not match any of them. We have no red eye reflection on any U.S. animals other than rodents, alligators, owls. It was neither. I thought it may have been a deer, but the eye shine was solid red. I was scared and yelled at it and prayed while running inside. I could not see the body. It was dark out. All I could see were those eyes. Never before or after have I seen such a thing. 4 months later was the panting incident. Stay safe, y'all. Sorry you had to deal with that. You are more than welcome to reach out. That must have been a horrifying situation. V. Shaman writes on Harley's episode, Terrifying Tales of the Smoky Mountains. Harley is vibing in the fifth dimension. Thus, electronics go haywire because of the surrounding and penetrating vibrations coming from his mind. Why he is privileged to see all of this so clearly. Just my theory and pure speculation, and while I'm sure it'll be a long time to prove of correct at all. And I do actually think there's something to do with the vibratory rate of the very being and their thoughts. I mean, doesn't it make sense that if something was putting off major vibrations that could penetrate the same vibrations on our electronics, like Bluetooth and such, that they may make it go haywire? Makes sense to me. Makes sense to me that a lower, denser vibration would also have the effect of draining batteries, though I don't think they're a lower, denser vibrational being, but when they enter in our dimension, maybe the environment's vibration comes down. Again, pure speculation and theory. I love that Harley is gifting, though. It's something every single one of the researchers in the paranormal field should be doing, and so many of them don't because they're very egotistic. Okay, so that I don't agree with that, but agree to disagree. And insecure about what others think and don't think it'll be taken seriously. Thank you, Harley, for being an adult and leading in some sense. There's far too many adults needing such an example in today's world. Very interesting. I'm sure there's going to be responses to that in the comments. Boundary Waters episode, Avi says, my first encounter was by Red Lake in Minnesota. Please reach out. Bigfoot 10 attack in New Hampshire, tap into alignment, also says, Vermont girl here. I've heard a few accounts over the years from people in my area. Made me a believer. So happy and grateful to find my tribe with all of you. I just want these beings to be kept sacred rather than exploited. Very interesting. Denny episode, Rocky writes, the place he's talking about in the area of Conroe to Montgomery, Texas, is a region that has had lots of reports, maybe the most in Texas. Please reach out. I'd love to hear about what you've experienced or what you've heard. Guy White writes, I've had an experience, level B, very real, with a very interesting ending. Please reach out. Just want to say thank you to Scott for $1.99 super chat on the country episode. I really appreciate that, Scott. That helps out immensely. Here we go. So this is from the Honabi 384 episode, Sober Life Adventures. And congratulations for that as well. I live just outside the Tahoe National Forest and grew up there. I have had things happen, heard things in the woods I can't explain that makes sense. In the summer 2003, my wife and some friends went camping. When we went to bed, we put the ice chest inside the camper shell. When I woke up, I found both ice chests about 200 yards down a hill with all the food eaten. The packing was not shredded, but opened if I would have opened it. All my sodas were open in one beer. The rest of the beers were smashed. Everyone in the group just said it was a bear, but still to that day, I don't think that was the case. Does anyone else think it was a Bigfoot? I don't know. That's interesting to think about. Let's see what we say in the comments about it. Moving on here. Great Barrington episode, John writes, our 3 face-to-face encounters literally were in Connecticut, not far from New Haven. 2 were in our kitchen window, which scared the daylights out of my sister. Would love to hear more about that, my friend. Please reach out. On the Martin Groves episode, Impossibly writes, I've seen a brown flash move so fast, it was like Superman or the Flash from the movies. I mean, covered 100 plus yards in less than a blink of an eye, a fast blink, and you would have missed it. It looked like brownish gray fur, and where legs would have been was almost clear, as if the legs were moving faster than the eye can register. It's extremely interesting. Reach out, please. And if anyone else has experienced that, where the legs were moving so fast, I would love to hear that as well. Pennsylvania police officer episode, Don writes, I literally just got home from my camp just north of Kane. I was listening to this on my drive home, and I'm heading back tomorrow with friends. I've spent a lot of time in the deep woods in PA hunting and fishing, but have yet to hear anything out of the ordinary. But in 2018, I did come across a track I can't explain. This was in the mountains of Idaho while elk, mule deer hunting. My buddy that I was hunting with said a few years earlier he heard a roar that rattled his chest close to where I saw the track. Extremely interesting. From the Alabama episode, 429, I believe, Arthur says, can't say too much on the wire, but the 8-footers are the kids, so to speak. It's the way it's further north you go, things get bigger. Wild game is bigger. I'm in my 60s, so we know, but now you know they can be playful, but don't don't piss them off. Don't make him mad. You get it, guys. All right. Police officer Bigfoot encounter, episode 257. Jim writes, historian, scholar, not a witness yet. The Sass have reasons they don't want us around, and for us to know why they want us not to know. To know could and may have cost lives over time. The vendetta against a tree stand could be years in the making, and or a grudge between the Sass and the family who put up tree stands. I propose these ideas because the Sass seem to be keepers of the woods wildlife. They clearly don't like hunters. It could be they're protecting the forest, could be that is their job by force. We just don't know. And we may not ever know. As I said, to know may be our end. It could be they're protecting their young territory. Humans as pack animals know the extent we go to protect. Maybe they're protecting a door or ceremony or event, or maybe one was sick and they wanted space. They manipulate physical matter, which makes them physical to an extent. We can't wisely assume that they don't know this fact. A clue is the speech during this encounters. I don't know it all. All I can say is be wary, be less curious, have food or gifts upon meeting, and swift feet. God bless. This message is a test to this channel to see if they read comments. I have over 35 years research across numerous fields. I'm no expert, but I'm a master student. Good luck to this channel regardless. So this is like when someone writes an essay and puts, I'll give you a free Mountain Dew to the teacher if you read this. So yeah, I read every content, dude. I don't read them all on the podcast, but I thought this one was interesting. So thanks, Jim. Appreciate you taking the time to write it. Pennsylvania police officer. John also writes, no problems here. We had 3 face-to-face encounters at our home in Connecticut, and my daughter just saw one outside of Utica, New York, near the Thruway rest stop. She said cars were just going by, so she stopped to look and said, am I the only one seeing this? Reach out, please, John. That sounds extremely interesting. There's an episode, 456, was a Bigfoot or Dogman we experienced that night. Reggie writes, I think I'm talking to Reggie in the future too. From the best of my memory on a map, if you start at Lake Texoma, move southeast to I-45, keep going south to the Houston area, and then look towards Louisiana, then look up towards Mena, Arkansas. There are 17 to 18 state parks, along with 3 national forests, not to mention several creek and river systems that resemble an interstate highway system that these creatures could use to travel and never be seen. Don't know for sure exactly how many sightings have been reported in this region over the years, but this area does include Boggy Creek and Area X, along with a big thicket. Very interesting. That's a great way to kind of summarize what's going on over there. Here we go. This is from a conversation with Dustin Severs about the Abominable Snowman of California, which is a great book. Weldon writes, I'm exactly one of the Gen Xers who grew up and still am fascinated by BF, or Bigfoot. In fact, I have a weird connection to some of the most well-known Bigfoot encounters. In October 1967, I was 10 months old and my father was attending Humboldt State in Eureka, not too far from the PG site. My family's site cabin in the Sierras, where I spent my summers, is only about 8 miles or so from where the Sierra sounds were recorded. Didn't know that until just a few years ago. That's a huge allegedly there, that site isn't well known. I'm just going to put that back there. But that's what Weldon said in his comment. Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. That's cool. Lori writes, my dog was hanging from a limb. I grew up in the Ozarks, Oregon County, in fact. Don't know where the guy who said he lived in Ozarks was, but I dig talking to him about what he has seen there. If you happen to read this comment, you could get in contact. I saw one in 76 down by 11 Point River. We'll never forget. I would love to hear more about that. Please, Lori, reach out. Love to talk to you. In Revenge of the Sierra Sasquatch, Charles writes, 1984, 70 miles south of Lake Tahoe, took a 14-day hike and camping trip. First day hiking up, about 8 hours in, we got up and into the mountains. We get to a creek. Everyone stops and was going to take a quick break. But keep walking and going over the creek. I got my right boot soaked. And as I'm cussing to myself, as I walk, looking down at my wet foot, I started to smell the smell I never smelled before. And as I was coming up to a set of thick trees, a Sasquatch came around said trees. Here we are, 15 feet tops from each other. Me being 15 in my head, thinking, no way I'm standing here seeing a Bigfoot. The Sasquatch must have been thinking the same thing, because the look on his face was like, no way am I seeing a human. We stood there staring at each other. I heard people talking. The Sasquatch looked over my left shoulder. I never took my eyes off him. Then he looks back at me, rotates his whole body, and sprints off, never to be seen or heard by me again. No one believed me, but I don't even care because I felt lucky enough to seen a Sasquatch up close. Charles, you must have seen details. And if you would like to reach out, I'm going to please reach out. I'm going to invite you to do so, bigfootsociety@gmail.com. I would love to talk to you about your sighting. On one of my Bigfoot in Iowa Festival Talk episodes, Noel says, my girlfriend and her friend both swear they saw Bigfoot outside Menlo, Iowa. They both came to my home about 2 a.m. in tears, terrified. It's not the only sighting that's happened in that area, so please reach out or give them my info to reach out directly to me. I would love to talk to them and help them work through it. On the Eastern Nebraska Bigfoot episode from quite a while back, Gary writes, my friend had Bigfoot reach his arm in his car window in Bellevue, Nebraska, along the river in 1980. I am not surprised. A lot of people would say that's ridiculous. It is not, guys, from what I've heard. Please reach out to me. I would love to talk to you or your friend about this. A long time ago, I talked to Jesse from Hellbent Holler. Brandon put a comment on there that said, I've got a place in Kentucky that makes LBL look like Disneyland. Brandon, I'm going to say reach out. Let's talk about it. Pennsylvania police officer Multi-Brad writes, I used to cook for the Bigfoot Society at Dad's restaurant in Portland, Oregon. I'm wondering if it's the same group. Well, it's not. I'm guessing you're probably talking about the Western Bigfoot Society, which is a pretty cool group back in the day. But yeah, Bigfoot Society is my podcast. But yeah, there was a Western Bigfoot Society, a gentleman in the St. John's area, Portland. That's probably him. And that was like way back in the day. Central Tennessee Sasquatch Siege episode. Sayo says, Roger, our farm is very close by. We have had weird things happen as well. My friend, reach out to me, and I can get you in touch with Roger if need be. But I would love to talk to you. Revenge of the Sierra Sasquatch, Colorado user says, another amazing post. Very interesting that going downhill, it looks so smooth, like he was going down an escalator. Super agile, scary, and weird. Also, many have said their feet are kind of hinged. Yeah, that makes sense, guys, because you got the metatarsal break. Wait a sec. If your dad knows him, talk to him since he's older and won't be around long. And I was mentioning this before you guys did in the podcast. Don't put it off. Plus, he might like to hear your encounters. Just talk to him, even if he doesn't do the podcast. Thank you for telling us about your encounters, and you have the best support of all, someone who was also there, your dad. Best from Colorado. Solid words in there. This is from a live call-in show. The Octopus writes, there are a few hotspots here in northern Georgia as well. Yeah, there absolutely are. I know a researcher who used to monitor activity near Clayton, Georgia. He showed me a couple of pics of usual Bigfoot handprints in the mud, big handprints, and with thermal ridges. Yeah, northern Georgia is pretty wild. Revenge of the Sierra Sasquatch. Bruce writes, El Dorado County has long been a squatchy region. Most of the high Sierras is quite isolated, well-watered with streams and lakes and a great variety of wildlife, so it's prime habitat for them. Faceless writes, I lived in El Dorado County for a long time. Being a child to two outdoor enthusiasts, I've spent a good slice of time in those mountains and have had a pretty good understanding of the locations he's talking about. And I can say that I've heard strange whistling around rivers, same whistle coming from multiple directions. Forests go quiet near lakes, and have an experience where I could not look away from one portion of the forest in a trail off Highway 88. I was stuck looking into the woods and couldn't move. I could not shake the feeling that something was looking at me, but I couldn't see anything. I brushed it off because I didn't want to look scared in front of my hiking partner at the time. But being 3 hours from the car and getting towards dark, I, without explanation, pushed my partner to move a little quicker because I started to feel sick for no reason. Further note is that there are extensive mines and cave systems all throughout the portion of the Sierras. Some are visible from main highways and roadways. Others are not so easy to come by, but when you do, they are not small. Thanks for the great podcast and interview. Keep your eyes open and be well. Another individual on that says, by any chance, would that be near where the Sierra Sounds were recorded. Faceless writes, the spots I frequented the most are north of that particular area. Granted, I know about as much of Ron and Al's particular camp spot as anyone else, so not a lot. Only some trailheads. But that ski resort he speaks of is easy to figure given the wilderness south of Tahoe and the grouping of lakes. I'm not trying to blow up a spot, but he did say it's decently traveled, so all I will add is that given what I know of the area, it would seem like I don't know if I'm going to read that. Guys, let's talk for a minute. If there are research areas or like historical Bigfoot areas, please be careful what you share in the comments. There are spots that we just want to be careful how much we say in the comments. Just respect certain things. Because if a few thousand people start going to an area, it might not be a Bigfoot area anymore. That's all I'm going to say about that. But I appreciate the comments, Faceless. You're welcome to definitely reach out to me. I would love to talk to you, but I'm not going to read your whole comment. Just in case. From We Were Being Lured to the Woods, Colorado also writes, another amazing post. I'd be tempted to keep your dogs on leashes since even well-mannered dogs have taken off after these creatures. Absolutely. And many have said loud scraping, electronic or even car door sounds may be a portal opening. Weird for sure. Thank you for your caution and telling us about your terrifying encounters. I agree with you on that. Meredith writes, thank you, Jeremiah, for the opportunity to give my accounts. There actually was more. Started to head into the hyena type. Oh my goodness, you had stuff about the hyena type creature. You got to reach out. I can attest it takes a lot of courage to share not only my experiences, but to trust the audience members enough to share some of my personal takes on the phenomenon. I didn't expect others to share my views, but I do expect them to understand that filling the subject matter from several accounts into one episode is a tricky task. I believe it went well and the edit was top notch. Thank you again. Thank you for coming on the show, my friend. When we heard the whoops, we knew it was there. Eric writes, just took time off to go to Oak Ridge and hang out with you all. Awesome. That's great. I like on the other side of the mountains in the McKenzie River Valley. I live about halfway between Eugene and Sisters. Hope I get to meet you. Got a few encounters to tell you about. Oh, yeah. I know of encounters all over these mountains between the McKenzie River Valley and Oak Ridge. Just found your channel, and I love it. Could even go camping while you're here, possibly have your own encounter. I hope I get to talk to you, Eric. If we don't get to talk, please reach out to me by email. All right, we got Caring from episode 257. I call baloney. All right, well, I'm sorry. I grew up in North Carolina. My grandfather was a guide trapper and deputy sheriff in the early 1900s. He was called on when children vanished in the mountains or fishermen disappeared, etc. Also searching for criminals. I never heard him tell anything about hairy people or monkey chatter. Grandpa always told us to stay out of the woods because the boogers might get us. Dude, boogers are Bigfoot, man. Come on. I mean, sorry, that was my editorial comment. Grandma, born in the late 1800s, also warned us about boogers. I always felt they meant ghosts. Grandpa never exaggerated and was a gentle, funny man when he wasn't working. I'm almost 80 years old. First off, thank you for caring enough to put your comment in here. I will say that going off of what those terms meant from that time frame, they were probably talking about Bigfoot. So this might be an agree to disagree comment, but I appreciate you caring so much to share it. So many incredible comments this time. And thank you to everyone who shared their stories, their encounters, their thoughts. There were a lot that I didn't get to, but we're close to an hour and a half, so I'm going to save those for next time. I'm going to have to start doing these every week because there are just some incredible encounters that are put in the comments, and I just appreciate y'all doing that, taking the time to do that. Thank you so much. It means the world. I do try to read everything in the YouTube comments, as that's where a lot of my interviews come from. But until next time, appreciate y'all listening. And if you've seen something say something, you can best contact me by emailing me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's the list. All right, I'm going to use this space this week to announce that I'll be at the Sasquatch Summerfest in Oak Ridge, Oregon as an attender. I won't be presenting or anything, but I'll be hanging out trying to interview people that have had Bigfoot encounters. If you're from the Oak Ridge, Oregon area or surrounding and you've had a Bigfoot experience, please contact me directly, bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Also, Priscilla was nice enough that if you get your tickets through SasquatchSummerfest.com and use code BigfootSociety, you can get 50% off the cost of your tickets, which is a big amount. So code Bigfoot Society to get 50% off your tickets, SasquatchSummerfest.com, and helps out the podcast as well. A special thank you to all the Bigfoot Society Patreon and YouTube channel members. It's your support that helps keep the show going, and I extremely appreciate it. If you want to join in the fun, you can join over at patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. I'll see you there. And again, thanks for listening.
Her and I can get on here and we can tell our stories. Maybe there's somebody else out there listening that's too afraid to tell their story. Maybe this will give them the courage to come out and not feel so bad about it. Who cares what anybody thinks? I know what I saw. I know what's out there. That's all I care about.
Please let people know. Please let them know. If you ever see one of these things, you need to tell. Because if you don't, then shame on you. You know? Shame on you.